Hello there and welcome to the Academy of Historical Fencing. Today I'm going to be talking to you about this particular sword that I ordered from Black Fencer. It's a Type 1 Schiavona. It was made as a custom sword, although I believe they are available if you want to buy them yourself, get a custom one made, maybe even order more than one. Now this particular sword has been a long time in the making. A few others have also received them over the last year or so. But I was quite keen to get this one because there are very few companies out there making good Schiavonas and even fewer companies out there making these earlier Type 1 Schiavonas. Now I actually own an original Type 1. Just pop down a moment. So I have an original Type 1 Schiavona here. So it's quite handy because I've actually got something to compare it to. So I've got an original and then a sparring copy made for fighting. So I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a moment. But first of all, the actual requirements for this sword was to make a completely functional, useful sparring sword. So not something for reenactment, not something for cutting, and not something heavily compromised. So I wanted something that had a relatively broad blade, similar to my original, to have a safe tip, as you'd expect from Black Fencer, to have a nice flexible sparring blade, but also a hilt that actually matches the Type 1 spec. So if you look at it, hopefully you can see the detail there. They've done a pretty nice job in sort of recreating the whole of sort of the hilt, kind of the cage section, if you move around. Now you can see I've actually used this for sparring. It's had a few fights, so it's got some dings and scratches and some nicks in the blade. So you can see it warts and all. And any issues that might have popped up you can see in the sword now. Now I'm obviously using it bare fingers, no gloves or anything, so I'll give it a good wipe down afterwards because this is going to be really oily and messed up afterwards. Now I own quite a few Schiavonas. In fact, if I just move off to the side to here, let's have a look. You can see I've got some of my sparring Schiavonas. So I've got a Darkwood, Jesse Belsky, Swordsmithy, and one of the others. Oh, I don't know if you can see. There's a Del tin further down, and I have others plus more originals. So I have quite a collection of Schiavonas, and I have to say, up until now, it's been really hard to get one that actually handles properly. So none of those swords that I've got, I would say, are particularly great when it comes to sparring. Some of them look really nice, like I've done a video before on this one here. You can see it, yeah, with the green shark skin hilt. It handles really nicely in the hand, looks really good, but as a sparring sword, it's still not quite there. It feels a little dead, a little heavy towards the hand. So I was hoping that Black Fencer would be able to make something that handles a little closer to an original. And I have to say, with the very first fight I had with this sword, it felt a completely different beast to all of the other Schiavonas that I've used. It's, I think, around 40 grams heavier than my original, which I'll post the measurements in the description so you can see, but almost all Schiavona makers make Schiavonas around 1250 to 1300 grams, up to 1.5 kilos. They really rack on the weight, and they pack it on by making these cages really big. So one of the things I asked them to make sure was that this was not sized any larger than a hand and a leather glove. So I put my hand in, it doesn't look gigantic. Whereas if you say, look at pop that down and get a shot of the top of my head. If I take a Darkwood, put my hand in, you can see it's huge. It's a very big piece of steel around the hand. You could actually get quite a meaty glove inside there, which some people might appreciate that, but I'm not looking for that kind of sword. I wanted something that replicates an original. So you pop a leather glove on there, and this is actually much closer. In fact, I'd get my original. So you can see original, in fact, bring them around so they're exactly the same. Original next to the sparring sword, and you can see there are a couple of things that I would like changed almost immediately, but in terms of the actual cage and the actual hilt, very, very close. So I'm quite happy with that. Pop that down. Okay, so Fit and finish, the metalwork of the cage, I call it the cage just so you know what I'm talking about here. So the finishing here, excellent. A little rougher on the inside, as every Repro Schiavona I've ever had is. Although this is better than most. The welds are good, nice and solid. The grip is pretty decent. The pommel is quite lackluster. I have to admit, given the choice, I would have had almost anything other than the way they did it. All of my other Schiavonas have nicer pommels. So this cat's head pommel, it's usually brass, goldish colour, and it can be embellished with all kinds of nice details. This particular one looks like it's almost like a munition grade Schiavona. It's got the bare minimum. It's kind of shaped in steel. It's almost like a rivet going. I think that is a rivet going straight through the middle of it, and that's it. So very, very plain. I think that does the whole sword something of a disservice when you look at the rest. You know, all this really nice metalwork, and then this rather crude pommel on the end. For comparison, my ancient and battered €350 swordsmithy, that's what the pommel looks like. And this sword is wrecked. It's had tons of abuse. But if we look at the design on that, that's quite nice. Maybe not the way they finished it, when they peened it, but in terms of embellishments and making things look nice, that's a little more impressive than the kind of the bare steel of the pommel there. So that's one thing I wasn't super happy about. Also the grip, it's okay. It's it's leather with a little bit of stitching wrapped around it. It's good. It's okay. Again, nothing fancy. But the pommel, even if it had just been coloured. Bear in mind, Black Fencer do finishes on all their swords. A bronzed or a gold finish on that would have at least set it off nicely. But yeah, I'd happily pay an extra £50 to get this looking a little fancier. Now, if we go back to the rest of the hilt, it's got a thumb ring, as Schiavonas should have. I'll post up some extra photos just in case there's any detail that you're missing, because I'm not actually looking at the screen at the moment, so I assume you're actually seeing the detail. So the thumb ring is nicely positioned. Hold the sword, thumb drops in, works nicely. And for those that have never used a Schiavona before, you can sort of use them in two different ways. You can put the thumb in the thumb ring and then put your finger over the crossguard and use it like a side sword. You can keep your hand completely inside the cage and just have the thumb onto the thumb ring and use it as a sort of a standard broadsword, sort of basket hilted sword. Or you can also hold it on the grip and rest your thumb on top of the thumb ring. And by doing that, you replicate the sort of the fencing style with a saber, where you rest your thumb on the back strap. So instead of resting it on the back, which you may not be able to do with a Schiavona because of all this, you can rest your thumb slightly offset onto the back of the thumb ring. So you've got three different ways of holding the sword already. Now, the overall dimensions of the cage are good. You'll notice it's relatively modest in terms of protection on the inside. That's because I wanted the original that I have replicated as a sparring sword. So there's the original, and then there's the sparring version. So again, you can see they are very, very similar. Now, I appreciate if you want to use this as a kind of a weekly sparring sword, you might want a few extra bars on there for protection, especially as you can't put a heavily armoured glove in there. That's a concession I made. It's a personal choice. I wanted a replica of my sword, or a similar sword. I didn't want something that was inspired by a Schiavona, so loads and loads of extra protection on the inside. This is a Type 1, and they're quite modest in the hand protection on the inside, so that's the way it's supposed to look. Now the blade comes from the broadsword design from a year or two ago, something that Nick was sort of working on them with, which is a really nice sword now. So it's quite a broad cut and thrust blade. Hopefully it's focusing on the blade and not my face. It's a really good sort of choppy blade. And if you want to get in there and cut and thrust, swing the blade around, works really nicely. It's not a kind of a light side sword blade. It does reward somebody that likes to actually swing the sword a bit. So just bear that in mind. So you can see, it's got, it's considerably chunkier than your average side sword blade. But it is nicely tapered and surprisingly thin. So good flex, pretty thin, so you're still able to get a fair bit of speed and it doesn't hit too hard. One consequence of that, though, is that it is... Come on, let's see if we can get it to focus. Let's try that. It's going to be a pain. Let's have a look. Maybe you can see. So I've got a few dings, such as here. Removal on the blade. You can see it's caught a bit of damage on the edge. I found it was actually taking a little bit of edge damage even after the first fight. So the edges are definitely not as durable as the normal Black Fencer steel. And we use a lot of Black Fencer steel, and it does hold up a little better than this. Saying that, once you've been in a few fights and it's, you bump down the burrs a little bit, I think that the more you use the sword, kind of the smoother the edges get, hopefully. But just something to bear in mind, it does take a little bit more wear than normal. So overall, if somebody asked me, would I buy the Type 1 Schiavona from Black Fencer, I would say, or what do I think of the Black Fencer Type 1 Schiavona? I'd say a really nice handling sword, nicely designed hilt. Pommel could do with a little bit of neatening up, and I almost forgot, the grip is too long. I don't know why it's this long. If I compare it to an original, or to my original, you can see it just comes back a long way. So when you're sparring, you've got the sword in your hand and the pommel projects quite far back. It should be sort of back to here, so your pinky is resting here. Instead, my pinky's all the way over here. And that does interfere with some technique, especially if you want to get some nice kind of rotational strikes moving, and that pommel can get in the way. So slightly reduce the grip and pimp that pommel just a little bit is my recommendation. Other than that, I don't know what the actual current price is, the selling price for these. When I ordered mine, it was a kind of a custom, it was a one-off, something that had been in development for several buyers for quite a while. So you'll have to contact Black Fencer to actually get a price. I honestly couldn't say how much they cost. Other than, I believe they are still going to be the cheapest Schiavonas that you can buy for sparring. Certainly if you're in Europe anyway. Importing a Darkwood Schiavona will cost you anywhere between £600 to £1,000. This didn't cost that. But again, I won't give you an exact price because it isn't going to help you, because that's just the price I paid for this kind of effectively a prototype sword. Compared to all my other Schiavonas, I'd say this is the nicest handling out of all of them. It feels the most like a Schiavona. I think it's got the safest blade out of all of them in terms of flex. The overall finish is excellent. It actually looks like a Schiavona, unlike some companies that make some weird Schiavona-inspired swords. It does look the part. So overall, I'd say it's a nice sword. Just get some of these little crude bits tidied up, shorten the grip, tidy up that pommel, and other than that, I think you've got a really good sword. And again, just for comparison, I'll just bring it back up so you can see original and Black Fencer. And I think pretty much anybody would agree that Black Fencer really knocked it out of the park in terms of matching the style and the look of an actual original sword. As I'm saying this and talking about having gold or bronze on the pommel, I do notice that my original is plain iron. Saying that, my original is nice on the shaping, and you'll notice that it doesn't just have a rivet going through, it's nicely rounded. So I suppose if you could match it a little close to that, that would be okay. But personally, I'd slap gold on it. Put that back down. I think it's a really good sword. Any questions about the Black Fencer Schiavona, pop some comments in the comment section, strangely enough, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I'll pop in the measurements, so I'll put the length of the blade, point of balance, and on the weight as well, just so you've got an idea of what it's actually like. But yeah, overall, I think it's a really good sword, just with a couple of tweaks, just to make it a little nicer. It's not cheap, so you're going to want to make sure it actually does what you paid for. Anyway, thanks for watching. Any questions again, pop them in the comment section, and thanks for watching our channel.